So Pete is my friend and a talented landscape designer and installer. Over the years, many of the gardens he's designed and installed have been on the tour. You can see a portfolio of his work on the Bringing Back the Native Garden Tours website under Find a Designer. Pete is the owner of East Bay Wilds Native Plant Nursery in the Fruitvale district of Oakland. The nursery is open on Fridays. Hi, Pete.
Hi, everybody. I kind of think that a better name for this, or at least a subject that is a little bit more to my heart is how to maximize our public spaces for wildlife value or habitat. And I think that it goes beyond just trees. Trees, we're starting to see, they can be mandated pretty well. They can be, by different municipalities. And we're making a lot of progress. There's quite a few good presentations that I saw online on native trees and the sidewalk strips and public spaces, which I was really happy to see. I hadn't seen them before. So including on the Bringing Back the Native site, there's some very good ones. I tried to cover things that are a little bit different than the ones that were covered in these other ones. So I really want to encourage people to experiment as much as possible in public spaces and sidewalk strips. Beyond sidewalk strips, you have, parkways, you have a lot of wide sidewalk strips in a lot of areas, especially boulevards. And so you have a lot more room in a lot of spaces. And I really think that what we need to be doing is maximizing our public spaces for wildlife value. And that's beyond trees. It's shrubbery, chaparral, vines even, and shrubbery of all types. Anyway, here's a couple of Monterey cypresses which have grown together here really nicely over the road. I just like that. So the reasons why we need to be doing this are varied, and they've been covered here by quite a few people in all these great presentations I've been watching. But every native tree in our urban space is like having a giant air filter along with food and habitat for thousands of critters essential for the healthy functioning of our ecosystem. I would say more than anything, hedgerows rather than just single trees here and there. I'm covering mainly single trees, but really hedgerows, I think, are the way to go in our public spaces because they provide such enormous wildlife value. And those include grasses, forbs, trees, shrubs, etc. And a good combination of deciduous as well as evergreen, which is important. And I think it can be done really well. Here is a landscape that we've worked on with some mature manzanitas in the sidewalk strip, and even a strip where we're having bracken fern here. We're encouraging it to fill in this whole area. Bracken fern is one of those things you have to be careful with in the garden, so a very restricted space like this is perfect for it. Here's a refugio. Manzanitas are my specialty. I just love them, and I love working with them. Here's one in our sidewalk strip, which is a very toxic strip, which gets a lot of traffic and a lot of stuff dumped on it. So it's amazing that things have done so well there. So manzanitas, there's quite a few of them that do surprisingly well in sidewalk strips. They don't need all that much space for their roots, and they do produce really well. The ones that we've had the best luck with are Arctostaphylos manzanita, like these ones. These are Mount St. Helena's. They do need pruning, not very often, but occasional pruning. These ones are very, very large. These are Mount St. Helena Arctostaphylos manzanita, the common manzanita. But they are slow. Here's right around the corner from my house in East Oakland, and this is not a very successful planting of natives, but they are natives and they are huge, and they are being allowed to grow up into the lines, the telephone lines, for the most part. These are incense cedars that are just enormous. You can just remember we have the largest trees in the world here in California, and to use them in landscapes can create very large problems as well. So you got to be careful. Here's some very unusual redwoods I found over in the Rockridge area. They've been pruned to be like lollipops, but giant lollipops. Here's one around the corner from my house that was planted about 30 years ago. And it's just incredible that they do as well as they do with so little space. This one is, I don't know how tall, but probably about 75 feet tall. And it's only 30 years old, but it does create a lot of problems. Bays, that's our most common tree in the wild around here. And they do provide a lot of of wildlife value when there's space, but they get so huge unless you were to prune them. They can be pruned into a hedge and kept as a hedge, but you can't forget to prune them for a couple years because they'll just grow way out of control. Although there are ways to get them back under control fairly easily as well. They do have, wonderful fragrance. They're actually pretty resilient to the city conditions, and they're very fragrant. Here are ceanothus growing in the sidewalk strips here. Ceanothus, they're absolutely beautiful for a period of time. They are good wildlife habitat, but they are not all that long-lived. This one in this sidewalk strip is still alive after 20 years, but it's starting to really decline, so it needs to be replaced. And that's something we need to start looking at. We're not going to find trees that are going to be one size fits all for sure. I mean, that's definite. And one of the things that a lot of our plants in California are adapted to wildfire, so they don't have a very long lifespan. Ceanothus, quite a few of the really blue ceanothus are some of those. Although I do know some that were planted 100 years ago and are still doing fine, but not the blue ones. More the Sierra ones and the white ones. It's just a great, beautiful size and gorgeous color and fragrance for a period of time, and they are evergreen. But they're very easy and inexpensive to replant, especially if you can get your municipality to agree to not start with a really large plant. You start with a really large ceanothus, and you're gonna cut quite a few years off its life. Start with a small plant and allow it to grow. A 1 gallon, a 5 gallon is fine, and you can get a very good street tree fairly quickly with care. Here's a really beautiful one with a red background I found in Berkeley. Vine maples are wonderful, and they're actually pretty. If they get a little bit of shade, especially if they get like morning sun and then afternoon shade, or vice versa, you can have beautiful vine maples, and they're very unusual shapes and sizes, and they can get quite large. Here's a little sidewalk strip in Berkeley that we worked on that has desert olive in the back, and in the front, the red is the brown dogwood, which is fairly drought tolerant for a dogwood. And it turns beautiful red leaves in the summertime. And then the bright green leaves and the yellow flowers of the desert olive is one of my favorites for street trees. Desert olives are great. And here's another one that works really well. I'm going to get back to desert olives in a minute. But mountain mahogany, it's a local tree, and it does very well under almost any condition. They can be pruned easily. They get to the right size and shape for many sidewalk trees. I always prefer multi-trunked for most things. And people are used to seeing single trunks, but it's one of those things that I think we just need to change people's aesthetics and beliefs a bit. Here's the desert olive on the left in flower, and they do attract a lot of pollinators. Then the mountain mahogany on the right there with all the silver seed heads. I did have some in this last photo here. These are the silver seed heads that last for a long time in the summertime on them. They're very attractive. And they do spread around the neighborhood, as we've seen. Western redbuds are probably some of the best sidewalk strip trees to grow, but I do really prefer the multi-trunked, as in the one on the left side here. I love the leaves. The leaves are deciduous, but the leaves provide a really good grade of light comes through them. Here's a single trunked one in Berkeley that I'm not as crazy over the single trunked ones. I like them more as and I think birds do too, prefer the multi-trunked, the real density of them. Bird nests are found much more often in very dense hedgerow type plantings. My aim here is to give people an expanded palette of trees and shrubs to use in our public spaces. And we really want people to think outside the box and experiment. It's so easy to write off some plants. And here's one of the ones that easily gets written off. And what a gorgeous street tree this one has turned out to be. And I've seen them as beautiful street trees in many places. This is the California buckeye, and this is a very large one. People, when they're discussing street trees, generally you don't want ones with great big huge baseball-sized seeds that fall. But you know what? They're really not so bad, because when they fall, they have a really thick cushion of those rubbery husks on them. So it's like a very soft ball hitting any surface. And they don't hurt. So although they can be quite large. They are poisonous, but so are many of the plants that we have. Many of our exotic plants and native plants are poisonous, but very few things actually get poisoned by buckeyes because they're extremely bitter. They get spit out very, very quickly by all dogs and anything that puts them in their mouth. So before any venomous effects can take place. So, and for the size of this one, there is some uplift here, you see, but it's not that bad for the size and age of this tree. It's really not that bad. One of the great things about buckeyes is that they self-prune wherever they hit resistance, like against a house or when they're even going up against another tree or something, they stop growing in the direction where they come into contact with something that they're rubbing on. So they do self-prune quite a bit, and they tend to really fill whatever size of an area and shape of an area you give them. Here's their perfect parkway tree. Here's one in Berkeley. And it's still very young, but it has the room to really grow and spread here too. Blue elderberry, you don't see these very often, but we do have a couple of them right down the street from the nursery. Here's one on the left there. This is just a few houses down from the nursery. And here's one on the right is also close to the nursery. And they're just beautiful, incredible wildlife plants. They do drop a lot of stuff, but nothing that stains. They do attract a lot of wildlife. They're covered with bees right now. I was just noticing yesterday. They have a lot of flowers and bees right now. The berries, they do get eaten by birds. They're also wonderful to cook with as well. The Catalina or island cherry, this is the Catalina Island version of our hollyleaf cherry, which is local around here. But this one grows very tall, very big, very quickly. And it's a good evergreen screen. They can be pruned into almost any shape you want. Once again, I like them as multi-trunk trees. And in parkway strips, when they're being cared for by city landscape folks, they tend to be made into all lollipops. Pretty much all trees do. And that's something that I hope that we're able to affect a little bit and get people to expand their view of what is beautiful and acceptable in landscape trees. So here's more hollyleaf cherries that you do have to be careful a little bit because the seeds that they drop, these cherries, they do tend to stain concrete purple. And personally, I like purple concrete a lot better than gray concrete, but there are people that don't. So be careful with that. Here's one this is a good example of thinking outside the box because laurel sumacs have been, we've been told for many, many years that they do not grow here in the bay because it gets too cold. Well, this is something that has changed. And here's one that we had at the nursery. It grew into the fence too much, so we had to cut some pieces out, and then it blew over in the big wind and rainstorm we had recently. But this was a beautiful shade tree for many years that people always congregated underneath it because it kept the rain off you if it was a light rain. It was filled with bird nests all the time until the raccoons discovered it, and then it was filled with raccoons for a while. So, but it's a beautiful evergreen tree. The laurel sumac, these get in the wild, they don't get very big. They only get about 8-9 feet around. This one was 35 feet around. So I think it was the largest one on record. I'm not sure, but I think so. And these grow down south, but they sure do attract the wildlife here. Oaks, I wanted to mention oaks because they are such a high wildlife value and they can withstand almost any conditions you give them. They are grown a lot as sidewalk trees around here, I discovered, and with different degrees of success. Some of them, in the coast live oaks even, if their roots are restricted, in more than just a sidewalk strip, if they can't expand sideways at all, they tend to stay a lot smaller for many, many, many years. So there are uses for them. Blue oaks in general stay much smaller and can deal with conditions even better than the coast live oak. And I didn't think that these worked all that well here inside the Bay Hills here. on the coast side, because you don't see them all that often. But I was surprised to find that they do very, very well here. And they do stay a little smaller. Here's one in landscape that we did in Alamo over here near Danville. And here's a blue oak that was left, and the whole landscape was designed around it. This big rock here it looks like a rock, but it's not. It's actually, it's a jacuzzi on the other side. But we filled it with lichen and Dudleya and stuff, so it did look pretty natural, very natural. Black oak is another one that has done surprisingly well on both sides of the hills. You see a lot of them around Orinda and the eastern side of the hills, and they do great there. They have beautiful new foliage, beautiful fall foliage, and just beautiful structure. And they tend to stay a lot smaller than coast live oaks, although over time they can get quite big. I do like the structure and showing that what they look like in the winter time too, because there's just a lot of beauty in oaks throughout the year, even the deciduous ones. And there's a lot of things that grow around deciduous oaks that don't grow around evergreen oaks. Coast silk tassel, that's another perfect size plant. The one issue with them is that they are very slow. So I always tell people, get as big a one as you can to start with, and you'll have good results. This is one that we planted over 20 years ago, like 22 years ago at a place in Oakland here. The toyons, they make great trees for the sidewalk trees. More shrubs, and less trees. And I like the multi-trunk ones a lot more than the single trunks. However, they do really face some issues around they tend to over time get infected with, what is it called? It's a rose disease anyway, that affects them pretty badly. And once they get it, generally they're not very good. However, we have found that the Davis gold toyon is very resistant to this disease I can't think of the name of right now. It's also very beautiful and great for wildlife. The Davis gold is a very good plant to use too. And I think that with more experimenting, I think we'll get more toyons that are more resistant to this disease. There's just so many around that I think we will get that. The cypresses, we have a lot of cypresses in California. They do amazingly well as street trees. Here we have Santa Cruz cypress on the left. And in the front, you can see a small Guadalupe cypress there and another Santa Cruz cypress in the back right there. This is here in Oakland, and they do amazingly well with air pollution of our urban environments. A lot of trees and shrubs and stuff can't take all the exhaust from our vehicles and stuff, but these have done incredibly well. These are only been in the ground for about 10 years. This is in West Oakland. Here's another one. This is a rare Santa Cruz cypress. And then here's a McNabb cypress on the right, which is more gray and stays smaller. And the Santa Cruz on the left. The Monterey cypresses, there's lots and lots of different, those ones are ones that have been in landscaping for a long time. So people have been selecting them from the wild for a very long time. Therefore, we have ones that can grow to any shape and size you could ask for. And the other ones, and as in so many California natives, we have not been selecting from the wild for very long at all. So the potential there for a lot of our native trees is tremendous. We just have to do a lot more experimenting, selecting to find the right sizes and shapes for different environments that we have. Here, we believe that a tree is better than no tree, but please do us all a favor and avoid the following landscape faux pas. And this is just for a chuckle. The girdled malt forest right here. And then the amazing thing you can do with shrubbery, which is done a lot in my neighborhood, but why? And then the queue of miscreants that you see here. That's just a little to be on the light side, but please keep experimenting and working with natives, and let's try to fill all of our public spaces with natives. One more thing I'd like to add is yesterday I asked a few neighbors here who are not very familiar with native plants, but I asked them what percentage they thought of the trees that we have around here, particularly in public spaces, are native. And they thought that it was like 60-70%, or 50 to 70% is what the people I spoke with yesterday thought. And I think a lot of people think that, but really, I think it's less than 1%. you know, not counting trees, there's trees, there's probably, you know, 5 or 10% at the most. But as far as all vegetation, it's got to be way less than 1%. People don't really grasp how incredibly strong and powerful the invasion of species has been here in California and in the Bay Area in particular. And it's very surprising when people find out that they actually often have 0 native plants on their site when they've thought all along that they had all these native plants. They're all invasives. So anyway, that's what I had to say. Thank you for listening, and have fun.
Thank you so much, Pete. Thanks for giving that presentation, and it was terrific that the audio visuals went smoothly today. That was nice. I wanted to say that a group of volunteers has been working on developing a draft native street tree list that can be put forward to city officials to ask them to formally agree to plant more native street trees. It'll hopefully be coming out before too long. We're getting comments on it now. And also, if you go to the Bringing Back the Natives Garden Tour website and look under the Doug Tallamy section, you'll find a very nice list of native trees that was drawn up by arborist Brett Desmarais. Not all of them are street trees, but they're labeled if they're trees for parks or trees for riparian areas or trees for the street. So you might find that useful. So Pete, thank you so much for joining us.
So we do have a native plant nursery here in East Oakland, East Bay Wilds, and we're open on Fridays.
Yeah, East Bay Wilds is great. He's got a beautiful garden area and lots of garden art and a fantastic collection of manzanitas and also ceanothus. Pete gives great talks. The Alameda County Water District offers a rebate of $2 a square foot of lawn removed and replaced with water efficient landscaping, up to $3,000 for single family residential customers. Alameda County Water District customers must live in Fremont, Newark, or Union City to be eligible. Landscapes must have low water use plants covering at least 50% of the converted area, cap or remove sprinklers, and projects must be pre-approved. You can save water, money, and support local fauna and pollinators by installing California native plants. Learn more and apply at acwd.org/rebates. Residential customers who purchase and install a WaterSense labeled weather-based irrigation controller can receive a rebate of $82. These controllers use local weather information to tailor irrigation schedules so that you only irrigate your landscape when needed. WaterSense certified controllers use 20% less water, save energy, and perform as well or better than other conventional controller models. You can learn more about them or about discounts on Rockio 3 smart sprinkler controllers at acwd.org/rebates. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for joining us.